Most people assume state licensing boards govern the beauty industry to protect public health and safety. The logic follows that regulators test practitioners and inspect salons to keep consumers out of harm's way. The training standards suggest a different priority. To become an emergency medical technician, most states require about 150 hours of instruction. To become a licensed cosmetologist, that requirement jumps to an average of 1,500 hours. Emergency medical technicians perform life-saving medical interventions under extreme pressure, managing trauma and life support during transport. A cosmetologist focuses on haircutting and styling. While chemical safety is a factor, the physical risk is significantly lower, yet the training mandate is 10 times higher than that of an EMT. This discrepancy indicates the U.S. beauty industry operates as a state-sanctioned professional cartel, using licensing requirements to insulate incumbent businesses from new competition. Identifying this regulatory capture is the first step toward understanding how state power is used to restrict economic liberty and how those restrictions are being challenged in court. Cosmetology's 1,500-hour training requirement towers over EMTs, childcare workers, and cooks. Meeting this costs students $17,000 and 350 days of lost earning potential. Yet only 10% covers health and sanitation. 90% is styling and low-cost labor. This creates the so-called accreditation to federal aid pipeline. State mandates allow for-profit schools to set high tuition, forcing lower-income students to take on substantial federal student loans just to enter the field. These students enter a market where the median annual wage is roughly $29,000. For many, the debt burden quickly exceeds their ability to pay. The debt pipeline enriches accredited schools while keeping licensee wages stagnant and pushing those who cannot afford the licenses into the informal economy. This is a classic case of regulatory capture. It happens when an administrative board is run by the very professionals it regulates, who use state power to block new competitors. In the early 1900s, the trade was decentralized and largely male-dominated. In 1900, women accounted for only about 5,000 of the nation's 131,000 practitioners. New electrical tools and synthetic chemicals brought real hazards, like scalp burns and dermatitis. State legislatures created licensing boards to manage these specific health risks. But modern boards have expanded their reach far beyond preventing chemical burns, moving instead into the aggressive policing of non-hazardous tasks. Under current regulations, unlicensed salon staff, like receptionists, are strictly prohibited from performing basic tasks like removing nail polish, despite the minimal risk to public health. These barriers create a catch-22 for immigrants. State boards frequently disregard foreign credentials, forcing experienced professionals to repeat hundreds of hours of basic training. Language exclusion further narrows the path. Research shows that English-only licensing exams reduce the probability of an immigrant obtaining a license by 5.7. They established that economic regulations must be rationally related to a real risk and cannot be unreasonably burdensome. The U.S. Supreme Court took a similar stand on the structural composition of boards in North Carolina State Board of Dental Examiners, VFTC. A dental board, run by practicing dentists, tried to shut down teeth-whitening kiosks in malls by issuing criminal cease-and-desist letters. The court ruled that boards dominated by market participants only have antitrust immunity if they follow a clear policy and are subject to active, independent supervision. Because North Carolina lacked this supervision, the board was held liable for anti-competitive conduct. For the average practitioner, the challenge isn't a Supreme Court case, it's the daily reality of a state board inspection. To measure how fair these interactions are, we look at the Due Process Accessibility Index, or DPAI. The DPAI tracks variables like the cost of a legal defense relative to income and the ratio of forced settlements to formal hearings. It measures how much power a licensee actually has. States like Kentucky have historically scored very low on this index, often due to a lack of independent oversight and high legal costs. Every licensee has specific rights during an inspection. This includes the right to demand a physical ID from inspectors and a written citation for every alleged violation. Verbal threats carry no legal weight. Most beauty schools focus purely on technical skills, leaving graduates unprepared for the administrative reality of the industry. A model known as compliance by design addresses this by integrating legal literacy and due process training directly into the curriculum. technical mastery is no longer enough to ensure a graduate's survival. In a captured market, the ability to document compliance and assert administrative rights is the practical requirement for maintaining a professional livelihood.